How I enjoy older cartoons. They were so weird.
Sir, you have a guest outside who won't leave.
How long has he been there?
Since Sunday, sir. I don't think he realized the doorbell exists until now.
Fine, let him in.
The door is unlocked, sir.
So, what can I do for you today?
I've been wanting to learn about the 1920s and the 2000s and how they compared to each other.
Very specific, but you came to the right place. I've been waiting for someone to ask me that question.
You have?
Of course, I've written down a list of everything we need to cover from these topics just in case I ever needed it.
Sir, you are strangely overprepared for this situation.
Never you mind. Let's go. Now, I think a good place to start off this expedition would be looking at some of the trends from both those decades. Trends from the 1920s greatly differ from the trends of the 2000s. You see, in the 20s, people used to sit on flagpoles.
That's weird.
Sure is. While many trends from the 2000s involved clothing styles and accessories. For example, things like this and this were staples of the 2000s.
Interesting.
Yeah, you know what else is interesting? Dead people.
What are we doing here?
Paying our respects. Some of the most famous non-actors from the 20s are conveniently buried right here in our own city.
I don't recognize either of these names.
You see, Glenn Miller was a very famous musician from the 20s, but was most famous during the World War II time. He was a big influence on the swing theme in music.
And the other one?
Oh, well, that's Charles Lindbergh. He was famous in the aviation industry and was best known for his flight from New York to Paris.
Wow, that really differs from the people who we got in the 2000s. All we have is Dan Brown, you know, the Da Vinci Code.
Exactly. I guess Joe Biden, the former vice president, was pretty famous as well.
2000s people probably have less of an effect on everyone.
Yeah, and plus a lot of those famous people from both those decades also starred in movies. In fact, you need to experience these films firsthand.
Six and a half hours later.
Wow, those movies were great. I enjoyed The Gold Rush and Phantom of the Opera, but the last one didn't feel like Jurassic Park 2.
Oh no, that's a different Lost World.
Oh,
And what's also great, now we get to watch some classic films of the 2000s. Alright, the red box didn't have much, but here's what I picked up. I got Monsters Inc., Spider-Man, and everyone's favorite, Transformers Revenge of the Fallen.
I've seen all of those.
Really?
Yeah, Transformers 2 sucked.
Ah, I see. But you know, none of this would be possible without the invention of the television back in 1927.
Oh, really?
Absolutely. The 20s also blessed us with the electric garage door opener.
Maybe inventions from the 2000s will be better.
Of course not. All that decade gave us was the iPod, self-cleaning windows, and that weird video sharing website. What was it called? Bluetooth or something?
Yeah, I guess the 20s were more revolutionary.
I mean, the wardrobe said otherwise, but yeah, I guess.
What do you mean?
Alright, I'm gonna have you do your own research on this one. Alright, I'll dress like I'm in the 20s, and you dress like it's 2004.
Okay.
One eternity later.
You know, I take back what I said about the 20s. You look like trash.
Wanna trade?
No, and you're out of luck. The store just closed.
Well, that's just fantastic. I guess I'm stuck wearing this. What's next?
Now we get to view some of the most influential pieces of art from the 20s. Online, of course. Did you find it yet?
Yeah, look at this. Andro Maison.
Interesting, isn't it? Look up the Harlem Renaissance once.
Wow, look at some of these art styles. Very interesting.
Yeah, it was a staple of the 1920s. In the 2000s, well, just come with me. Of course, graffiti and street art existed before, but in the 2000s it really hit its peak.
Wow.
As you can see, the art styles were drastically different. On a completely separate note, dance styles were very different as well.
Nice segue.
Thanks. But yeah, in the 20s we had classic dances like the Charleston.
What was that?
I don't know. But in the 2000s it was, well... Like that.
Whoa.
Yeah, let's go. I need to scrub my brain clear of these images now.
You know, stealing that helicopter got me thinking. What are some of the most famous people from both of these decades?
You know what? Yes, I will answer that question. Women like Anita Loos was a famous screenwriter, and Louise Brooks was a famous dancer. On the flip side, Al Capone was a famous gangster, and we all know who Albert Einstein is. Well, looks like we're losing altitude. Gotta bail.
What about the 2000s?
Oh yeah, well, Hillary Clinton was a big name, and she recently just ran for president. Speaking of which, other presidents such as George Bush and Barack Obama either reached their peak or just became relevant during the 2000s. Oh look, a racetrack. Let's land there. I want to show you one of my favorite sports from the 20s. No, at least wait until we reach the ground. Alright, so this is one of my favorite sports from the 20s, you know, besides boxing. Prepare to participate in a horse race.
Are you sure this is how they did it?
I've never been more sure of anything in my entire life. No, on second thought, this probably isn't how they went about doing it. Ready?
I'm really not good at baseball.
Hey buddy,
Hey,
wanna play some more sports?
absolutely not.
No, it'll be fun this time. We can play golf, maybe a little NFL. Those are both relevant in the 2000s.
No, I prefer we just skip to the next topic.
Suit yourself. Let's head back to my place.
Is this from the 20s?
That's right, it's the Prisoner's Song by Vernon Dalhart. Other such classics include things like the Bazin Street Blues.
How does this compare to the 2000s?
Well, let me just change the station.
Snoop Dogg. You know I'm mobbing with the D.R.E. Yeah.
Dang it, Snoop Dogg. Guess now we have to walk. You know, this situation reminds me a lot of the Teapot Dome scandal. Not so much the situation, but the fact that both of them ended badly.
What was that about?
Well, you see, back in 1921, Albert Fall had secretly leased a couple of oil reserves to private oil companies at lower rates. He was ultimately found guilty of accepting bribes to go about doing this.
Intense. What about the 2000s? What scandals happened during this time?
The only one I can think of right now was when Elliot Spitzer patronized some political escort service.
Well then.
Yeah, it ultimately led to his resignation as the governor of New York. It was a fun time. Oh my gosh, look, a taxi! We're saved!
Where would you like to go?
123 Street, please.
Okay, hang on tight.
So, anything else?
Yeah, actually, was there anything that was seen as taboo or not acceptable for the time?
In the 20s, basically anything to do with loosening the standard social structure for the time. And in the 2000s, well, basically being anything other than heterosexual was seen sort of controversial, but since then that has changed.
Very interesting.
Certainly, many other historical things happened in these 2 decades as well.
This is your stop. That will be $67, sir.
Oh, what were you saying?
I was just talking about major historical events. Remember when we played baseball earlier?
I try not to.
Well, in 1921, the first World Series was broadcasted on radio. In 1927, the 15th millionth Ford Model T was created, and the 18th Amendment was passed in 1920, not to mention electricity constantly becoming more frequent over the course of the decade.
If I'm not wrong, the 2000s had crazier events overall, right?
I guess you could say that. A lot of tragic events took place, such as 9/11, Hurricane Katrina, and Pluto was no longer considered to be a planet.
Wow, I guess the 2000s had it rough.
Well, that's one way to put it, especially with organizations like ISIS becoming more frequent. I'm sorry, do you still need something?
Did you have any more information for me today?
Nope, according to Kruis's rubric, that's about it.
Yeah, well thank you for your time.
Sure thing.
Oh, and by the way, how do you know so much about these 2 decades?
You know, some questions are better left unanswered. It's probably a good thing he'll never find out the truth.
I must keep this a secret.